So today we're going to talk about end-to-end testing, and we'll be using Cypress as our tool. Yesterday we used Jest for doing automated command line testing. Cypress is completely different in the approach it takes to testing. So today's a fun day. As I mentioned yesterday, this is like just a one day of video game playing with Cypress. It's really, really fun. One of my favorite um, testing programs of all time, which I'd use a lot in real testing as well. So really talk about end-to-end testing. We'll introduce you to Cypress, and we'll just do some tests using Cypress, Cypress, how to install it, how to configure it, and then how to write tests for it. It's a pretty fun day. This is one of the days we all like as instructors to teach because it's so much fun. So let's talk about the types of testing. We talked about, of course, about unit and integration testing. Today is end-to-end. Sometimes we see the word E to E or A to Z or Z, depending where you are, testing. And this is where you test the entire application as built. So once it's running, you just test it with no units. Everything's plugged in, all the APIs are on, and you test this thing as a finished product. Commonly, it's done by the customer. If you're a software shop writing software for other people, they would have end-to-end tests that are done prior to releasing this to the customer, or the customer may be doing their own end-to-end tests as acceptance testing. And we also do this kind of testing with Cypress as we're developing. And it's really great for that as well when you're developing web apps. So we'll do some examples of that. So let's just jump right into Cypress because it is just so much fun. Let's go into our browser and we'll pull up Cypress testing. Okay. Cypress.io. Now, the first thing you will notice about Cypress, apart from the fact that testing has evolved, is that the Cypress website is amazing. I've never seen a tool with just such an amazing website and amazing documentation for it. It's just incredible. And I'm probably going to say that a lot of times in the next 2 hours. So if I say the word Cypress is awesome, we can make it a drinking game and you can all take a shot of orange juice or milk or coffee when I say Cypress is awesome, because it really is. And the documentation is just incredible. So amazing site. It's just little touches that you would think are just wouldn't even think of, they've thought of. For instance, how to install Cypress. Let me just click on that. Oh, look, it copied that to my clipboard. Just a little thing like that. So I click there, copy to clipboard, and I can just paste that in case I don't know how to type in npm install Cypress, it will copy it for me to make sure I don't make any spelling mistakes, because Cypress is a fairly complicated thing to spell, I guess, maybe for some. So really great documentation on Cypress. And let's go here. Let's take a look. And they have all of our information on how to set up Cypress, how to write your tests. It really is really great documentation. The site is unlike any I've ever really seen before. They've got their docs site, and we'll go through a few of these and you'll just see how well documented this particular tool is. They really leave almost nothing to question. Any question you have, they have answered. Okay. So let's go to the getting started. Getting started. So we'll do this here. How to install Cypress via npm and a couple other ways. So we'll use the npm install. So they say, well, you should type in npm install. In this case, we'll go install Cypress save dev. That may be optional because I think Cypress now is smart enough to know it's a dev dependency, so it puts a dev for you. All right. So npm install Cypress save dev. And wait, there's more. Just in case you weren't sure what would happen if you type in npm install Cypress, they give you a video that shows what that actually looks like. Look at that. Like, how awesome is that? Like, who does that? That's amazing. I mean, it's pretty fast, but look at that. And how to start Cypress. It's amazing. There we go. So they really leave almost nothing to the imagination. They show you everything on how to install and run Cypress. And all of the documentation is like this, from the install all the way through to using it and all of the different functions that we use within Cypress. So really, Cypress is indeed awesome. So, all right. So I have a little project here that I've made. It may look familiar to you. There. It is the album search, or a version of it. So Beyonce, and there we go. Just like we did in the opening days of React API. It's modified a bit. I have these filters in here where I can filter out explicit 90s, 2000s. So I can put a couple of different filters in there as well to narrow down my search once I get them. So if I type in Queen, I get stuff that isn't really Queen. I get 2. That's disappointing. I should get them all with Queen. Anyway, all right. So this is the app I'll be testing. Now, the interesting thing about end-to-end testing is that you don't need to touch the source code at all. Now, in integration testing, we said you don't need to know a lot about the source code. In end-to-end testing, you need to know nothing about the actual underlying code. You just need to know there's a site that I'm testing, and that's it. We might need to look at the DOM a couple times to see what's going on there, because you want to like find different things, buttons and stuff. But we really need no knowledge of the underlying code, whether it's React, Angular, or Vue. I have no idea, and honestly, we don't care as end-to-end testers. In fact, there are situations, and I just did one recently, where you would make an entire project that is just a Cypress project and didn't even have the code at all in it. The project was 100% a Cypress NPM project, and its sole job was to test another site or a production site that we're testing for a customer. And that's perfectly fine too. So I, in fact, have the code to this project here, but I'm not going to look at it at all. I'm not even going to open up any of this stuff because it runs. It does what it's supposed to do, and that's really all that I care. Instead, I'm going to install Cypress and start testing it. And to do that, of course, I would do npm install Cypress, and I do save dev. I've done that already, and I'm not going to do it right now because I've actually installed it. I'll just switch branches here. And we'll go ahead, let's switch that. There. Let me just switch branches here because I've actually installed Cypress. Okay, and there we go. So now you can see that Cypress has been installed. We're installing version 9.7 of Cypress. Now there is a 10 Cypress, which I've used and is pretty good. A couple extra steps. We won't be using that today. We're going to be using version 9. I have 9.7. I think Compass may have a slightly different, but all the 9s more or less look the same. And we'll use 9 because all of the Compass work is based on Cypress 9. So when you install your Cypress, please install the correct version, and please don't upgrade your Cypress because that will cause you trouble later on with your Compass tests. All right. So if I go to Cypress, it tells me how to use Cypress. It talks direct download. That sounds good. And let's go to where it says opening the app. Okay. So a couple ways I can do that. The command really is Cypress open. That's one of the Cypress commands. And you can open it this way, or this way, or this way. But what I do, easiest way, is I simply put this in my npm package.json. I just make a Cypress, or whatever you want. But it's commonly a Cypress script. And I just add the Cypress open to that, and I'm good to go. what this will do is we'll open Cypress in interactive mode. And you'll see what that is in a second. So Cypress, open, and it runs, like they've said right there. They have Cypress : open. I'm just gonna make mine Cypress for now, but I may change that a little later, okay? So now I have Cypress installed, and I've added this Cypress script. That's really all there is to it. And to start Cypress, I'm gonna go to my command line and go npm run Cypress, okay? And it may, the first time, say something like, this is the first time you're running Cypress. It do some setup for you. And you may also see this note at the bottom, a version or update 10 something is available. Learn more. Please don't update for your Compass because it will cause you problems. Just close that. It should look like this. Now what Cypress does when it starts, and I've started this before, it creates a Cypress directory for you inside your project. And all the Cypress stuff ends up here. And this does get included in your Git commits. So we commit all this stuff, all right? So this is the Cypress structure they give you. Let's quickly go through what it added for us. So Cypress has some folders, has fixtures, integration, plugins, and support, those 4 folders. Fixtures is, as you expect, this is fixture data. Anybody remember what fixture data is? We use this in tests. It's data that's fixed. It's data that does not change. So if I want to fake out an API, for instance, or mock an API, I would use some fixture data. So we'll likely be doing at least one mock today, so I'll probably put it inside there when I want to mock something. I don't need that example.json, but I'll leave it there for now. I'll leave integration for now. We have plugins. These are extra things you can add to Cypress. We won't be adding any plugins, but there's some cool things you can do to add Cypress. Much like we have in VS Code, we have extensions and add-ons. We can do the same thing with Cypress. And we have this support folder, which is some configuration you can add to Cypress. We won't be doing a lot with this right now, okay? So those are those 3 folders. We don't touch those much other than the fixtures, but we do use the integration directory. That is where our tests are. You'd think they'd be called tests, but no, they're called integration. The reason they didn't call it tests, because of what if you have something like Mocha or Jest and it's looking for a tests directory or something with the word test in it. So Cypress wanted to avoid that completely. So nowhere in any of their structure do they use the word test. It's all integration for integration tests. And the integration folder contains some sample tests. These get added when you install Cypress. Some quick ones, getting started, and a bunch of advanced examples. And some of these are pretty advanced. It's pretty cool. All right. And you notice their tests are not called .test.js. They are called .spec.js. With Jest, would have called this to-do.test.js. But with Cypress, in version 9, it's called .spec. Fun fact, in version 10, they have changed this to .sci.js. Love that word, .sci. It sounds like a friendly, like I got a friend named Sci, right? Like my best friend, Sci. So sci.js. Okay. So when you start Cypress, you're presented with the initial console. Looks just like this. There. And it shows you all of the tests that you have configured. And these tests are exactly the same as my integration directory. And it shows you all of your tests. And you can run these tests one at a time, or you can run them individually. So normally we clean up these tests. We just remove them because we don't need these examples, and we replace them with our tests. But we're going to run these tests ourselves first. Okay. And there's a way to run all these tests. Over here it says run 20 integration tests, which means I must have 20 tests. Looks like 20. so I can run these tests. So what is Cypress going to do when I run these tests? What are these tests? Well, these are tests that Cypress has written that actually go and test a website of theirs. It's someplace on Cypress's cloud. It tests their website. And what Cypress does, it tests it live using a browser. Give it a try. Let's run these integration tests ourselves. Click on that, and what happens is Cypress opens up a browser on the right. That's a browser. And then loads your tests and starts running them, doing a bunch of different things. So now it's going to open up the website there and just do some tests. Look at that. So Cypress is visual. It tests the application just like a user would, clicking on buttons, entering text in input fields, scrolling up and down, doing all the things that a user would do. And we write tests with that in mind. These are end-to-end tests that would test what a user would experience. You can see it runs pretty fast. So this is all about Cypress. This is why Cypress is so fun, because we run these tests, we get immediate visual feedback about what's happening. These tests, map navigation, it's doing some network requests, it does all kinds of examples. Cypress can do some pretty amazing things. Things like time. It can even pretend that it's a different time of day and do something else. Change the clock. Lots of really, really cool things in Cypress. Now, these are running pretty fast, but you notice this is still slower than something like Jest, isn't it? Because Jest runs on the command line completely and doesn't have to wait for pages to refresh because it's rendering it itself. Whereas here we are waiting for the actual site to render each page to us and change the screen. So it is quite obviously a lot slower than doing an automated test using Jest, which is why we don't do end-to-end testing all the time, but it's done in cases where you want to have acceptance of the client or an end-of-day test of all your stuff. And there we go. It ran all the tests. All specs ran. It took 93 seconds. Okay, so this is Cypress. And this is what we'll be doing today, testing my little album search using Cypress. We're not going to write 120 tests, however. We're going to write significantly less than 120. Okay, so there's my Cypress. So what we normally do is we remove these integration tests to start with, because we don't really need them. We just remove them. So I'm just going to go to my directory and just clear out those folders. So let's go there, and we can just delete these two folders right there, getting started and advanced examples. Delete those, yes, delete, and they vanish from my console as well. All right. So let's write a first test in Cypress. So how do we write tests in Cypress? Well, same thing. Let's make a very little file here, and we'll call it our first test. So make a new file. Oftentimes you'll see them with numbers like 1 dash. That happens often. It's up to you. So I'm going to go 1 dash first test.js or just first test. It's up to you, but it has to have spec instead of test. So it's going to be first spec instead. So first dot spec.js. Okay, and that test should show as a spec inside my Cypress. All right. So yet another test runner. We had to deal with Mocha. We had to learn all about Mocha, and then we had to learn Jest. Admittedly, they're fairly similar. They both use describe and test, so not that hard. But now we have to learn another one. So what does Cypress have for their testing language? Well, let's go to the test site. And by the way, the console, being Cypress, is laid out really well, and you can get to any place you want to go really quick. Let's go to write your first test. Let's click on that. and it will tell you how to write your very first test. There. Add a test file. We did that. Yeah, okay, great. Add your first spec file. By the way, I can see they've actually changed this to sci.js. So the documentation is now for the later version. Everything else applies. It's just the file names have changed. Okay, there. And they talk about how to visit a site. But you notice this looks exactly the same as Mocha and Jest, doesn't it? It has a describe and it has an it, which is great because we know this already. So let's make ourselves a describe for our test, because it really is a lot like Mocha and Jest. So make a describe there. And we'll just call this tests to see if Cypress is working. There. All right. And in case you're wondering, what is Cypress doing while I'm typing? Let's go and take a look and see what it's doing here. Cypress is watching my file. I'm going to start this file now and see what actually happens. Let's start this test. No tests found, which is exactly what we expected. And this is what Jest did as well. So we'll leave this window here. I'll try to make it a little narrower. It's going to be hard to see it, but we'll just kind of change this pane. There we go. And let's watch what Cypress does as we do some tests. So just as with Jest and Mocha, we'll use an it. I will say can visit the web page. So we're going to have our test visit a web page. Because once again, this is not unit testing. So we don't do things like run a function or test if true is true, although we can certainly do that. Instead, we're going to visit a web page. Okay, so there's my test. And there's no assertions. Like all test runners, Cypress only fails a test if there is an assertion. And there was no assertion here. We didn't do anything at all. So our test passed. So let's go ahead and try to visit our site. Now, right now, this site is at, there it is, localhost 8765. Let's just copy that. All right. Now, the thing about Cypress is it is very, very intuitive. It's really easy to guess what the commands are. All Cypress commands start with sci. I love that. It's so cute. Sci dot something. Okay. So in this case, we're going to visit a web page. So Cypress has made the visit command. I want to visit the website. Visit. And yes, I also cannot spell when I'm doing Cypress as well. So there, we'll visit that website. There. That's it. So let's watch and see what my test did when I added this line. That's exactly what it did. It visited the website. Now, what would happen if I gave Cypress an invalid website? Let's find out. Let's say some port that doesn't exist. There. Much like with Jest, Cypress is also self-asserting. It couldn't visit the site, got a connection refused, so the test failed. So Cypress is also self-asserting, which means although you can put assertions, a lot of the things you'll do just are self-asserting. If you can't do something, it will immediately fail your test. Okay. So this is great. So we have really some simple tests for Cypress, right? Let's try something else. Let's maybe visit the website, and maybe we'll see if we can do something on our site. All right. Let's go ahead and have our test do something when we're visiting our site. So this is a sample test. I'm going to make another test for testing out these checkboxes. And by the way, in Cypress, this is a live site. This is not just a view only. This is actually a live browser. So you can interact with it as it's doing its thing. All right. Okay. So let's make another spec file. I'm going to call this I'll call it checkbox spec, because I'm going to be checking or testing my checkbox functionality in my app. And with Cypress, we test things that you can't normally test with something like Jest or Mocha. We test what the user experience is. Is the checkbox actually visible on the screen? Can they interact with it? If they interact with it, does it behave like it's supposed to behave? For example, if I check on that checkbox, does it uncheck? What happens when does it enter an unchecked state? So I'm going to be testing this. So if I click on this checkbox, it should enter a unchecked state. So I'm going to write a test for that. So I'm going to grab my describe because it's pretty simple, and it does the same thing, and it's going to visit the site. Now this is the one test. I'm going to close that test because this test is done. Every test can be a separate spec. You can run them all in one, but we'll do it all as a separate test. So here's that checkbox spec. Let's open that up and get that test going, which should look exactly the same as the previous one because we haven't changed anything. It visited the site. Great. On the left pane here, Cypress will show you what it's doing. So in this case, step 1, visited the website, check mark, that succeeded. Let's do something else. So inside the visit the website, why don't we locate this checkbox? Much with like with Jest, we have to locate things to interact with them. We want to find this checkbox. Okay, so I don't have access, let's assume, to the source code for this website. All I know is what I have in my browser. So what would I do if I wanted to find out anything about this checkbox? How could I inspect that checkbox? What would be the tool that I use for that? I know I'm giving it away, right? So yeah, inspect, DevTools, of course, right? I simply go to the checkbox and inspect that element. Okay, and there it is. Let's just move that pane a little smaller. There we go. Okay, so there it is. That's the checkbox I want right there. Okay, so how am I going to find it now? Now, in Jest, we had to use all these fairly complex functions to locate them. You know, find something with the checkbox role or something, and then I've got 4 of them. Maybe you get the first one. Well, let's see how Cypress does it. Remember we talked about yesterday that we can't use something like jQuery in Jest, right? If this is jQuery, we could easily find that label, couldn't we? It's got a class. It's got like I've got a form group here, I've got a div, and then inside that div, I have a bunch of other divs, one for each of those filters, and the first one is that checkbox. So that'd be pretty much a piece of cake in jQuery, wouldn't it? Okay. Well, in Cypress, we use what's called sci.get. Sci.get as our command to find things in the DOM. Much like with Jest, it was get. We use things like get by role, get by text, but with Cypress, it's just sci.get. Okay. Well, how do we use sci.get? Let's ask Cypress what they think about that. So let's go here and we're going to docs and let's take a look. We'll probably go to the API. And their API documentation is also pretty amazing. You can search right here and it gives you a live search. So sci.get get. How do I do a sci.get? Querying, how to query for things. And look at this. As it turns out, Cypress uses jQuery under the covers, which is amazing. Who doesn't like jQuery, right? They make it super easy. So yes, we can do jQuery queries to find anything in our DOM with Cypress. So in this case, I'm going to find my checkbox using a jQuery selector. So I know it's pretty easy. Once again, inspect this. I'll inspect it here so I don't hide my test anymore. There we go. DevTools off here. I'm going to go to my live browser instead. Let's just close that. Let's inspect it here instead. There we go. Okay. So I want to find this form group. Okay. I want to find filters form group. All of the divs that have a class of filters form group. Now, anybody remember back to the jQuery days? I know it was a while ago. How would I get something using a selector for filters form group? Dollar. Well, that'd be jQuery. It doesn't quite use dollar, but that's a good point. In this case, we use this sci.get, and then the selector goes in here. Really, sci.get is like dollar. So think of sci.get as the dollar. Okay. So there. So in this case, it'd be sci.get, and yes, filters form group. Can I copy and paste this? I don't know if I can do that. Let's take a look. Because I'm just the world's laziest typist. So right there, can I copy? Maybe not. I'm sure I can, but I'll type it in. Okay, so dot filters underscore form dash group. And there's a sci.get. Let's see what Cypress did now. There's my test. And now you can see, oh, hold on, save our test. Oh, fresher again. There we go. There. It did a get. So here's the steps. It did a visit, and then it did a get of the filters form group. And it shows me what happened. If I hover over that particular step, it got all those 5 groups. This is great. So it's very, very visual. So those of you who do well with visual things, you're going to love Cypress. So there's really no question what happened. Yeah, it worked. I got all my filter form groups. Great. And if you click on there, you can actually freeze it in place on there. Okay. Unpin that. Great. Okay, so now I've got my form group. I've got 5 of them. So I want to get the first item from this form group. What would I do, or what do we think, knowing that Cypress is very easy to use? What do we think the Cypress command is to get the first? Also knowing that it's an awful lot like jQuery. I want to get the first item from that group. What command do we think I'd use? If we had to guess. Well, once again, Cypress is very easy. It's just first. Dot first. There. Let's get the first item. And Cypress runs my test. Follow along. Visit the site. Get all 4. Get the first. I've got the first item. Okay. But I want to get the checkbox in that item. And how is that thing structured? So if I look at this, inspect that again. There. Let's take a closer look at it. So there it is. It's a div. It's got an input. Okay, so it's got an input inside that form group. That is the one I want. I want that actual input, which is a type of checkbox. Okay, so I want to get that item. So how would I find something in jQuery? If I had this group and I want to find something further on down the DOM, I would use the .find, wouldn't I? Well, it's the same with Cypress. It's .find, and I want to find an input. This is just like jQuery. All right, back to our test, and we'll just follow it along again. So there we go. Get the first, and now I got the checkbox. It found the input. Great. So now I want to uncheck that. Right? I want to send an uncheck event to that checkbox. So, knowing that Cypress is very, very easy to use, what command would I use to uncheck a checkbox? I'll take caller number 2 on the chat line. On click, well, I don't want to click the checkbox. I actually want to make it unchecked. I want to uncheck that checkbox. Well, of course, the answer is in the question. It is indeed uncheck. Cypress makes it really, really straightforward. I want to uncheck the checkbox. Yeah, there we go. Let's watch what happened here. So here's my sequence of events. It's so visual. I just love Cypress. Cypress is really awesome. Okay. So got the website. I've got the 5 groups. Got the first item in that group. I got the input in that item, and then I unchecked it. Okay. And notice it's flashing back and forth. It's showing me the before and the after. Isn't that incredible? And yes, I'll change the zoom. Let's just fix that. Good point. The question is, can we change the zoom on the Cypress window? Yes, that was actually the next point I was going to do. So what you can do is you can actually configure your Cypress to use a different resolution in your test. If I click on that, it says, oh, look at this. You can change how your viewport looks. It says to do that, go to your cypress.json file and make the browser any resolution you want. Let's try that. Let's go to our cypress.json, which I happen to have right here. And it says, I'm just going to copy that. Copy. Okay. And I'll put this in here. We'll change the viewport to something like that. Now, you notice Cypress closed my test. Any change you do to the configuration, like the Cypress.json, of course, Cypress can't re-render the browser, so it simply closes your test and you have to open it again. So let's make this 800 by 600, or maybe 800 wide by, what's a good aspect ratio? Would that be 500, 8 by 5, 8 by 4? We'll try that. We can experiment. Okay, let's try this now and see what we get. Try again, and we're going to go ahead and run our same test with a slightly different resolution browser. Okay, there we go. A little better. I can probably make that a lot taller, can't I? So I'm going to change this to maybe 800 by, let's take a look, maybe 8 by 8. Let's see what that looks like. And we can experiment with this to see what kind of resolution we can get out of our browser. And you can also test the application in different resolutions of browser to make sure the CSS is working. And you can query if things are visible on the screen to make sure your CSS is working. Okay. So that's a bit better. I can certainly see that a little better. Maybe I'll make it maybe 900 because it's a little bit, I'm cropping off the edge. Maybe 9 by 720. There, let's do that. Okay. Run our checkbox back again. There we go. How's that? Looking good now? All right. So let's follow along with our test again. So we got our page, we got the group, we got the first one, got the checkbox, and we unchecked it. And if I click on that, there we go, there. So you notice it shows you before and after. Look at that, before the check, it was checked. After that action in Cypress, it was unchecked. Cypress is really awesome. It even shows me the results of what I did before and after. Whenever you do an action in Cypress, like a click or an action to the DOM, it always shows you the before and the after. So before, it's hard to see, I know, because it's got that red dot in there, but you can kind of see the green check marks, and then after, it changes a little, a little bit disabled and different shade as well. So great. There's my before and after. And once again, this is self-asserting. As with Jest, all these actions in Cypress are self-asserting. So for instance, if I had tried to send an uncheck operation to something that you couldn't uncheck, it would cause an assertion and my test would fail. And we'll try that again in the next test we do. Okay. So it's unchecked, but I've simply sent unchecked. I want to make sure, is that checkbox indeed unchecked? Okay. So this is where I do Cypress assertions, and they're should. It's like expect in Jest, it's should in Cypress. I want to see or check that checkbox should not be checked. Okay, and with Cypress being very easy to use, the expression really is not be checked. So that checkbox should not be checked. And all of my tests pass, and my assertion says, yes, indeed, that checkbox was not checked. So there's a successful test right there. So there's one test. I run the entire test again. It's very fast. There. It runs a complete end-to-end test of that particular feature. I'm really asking the difficult questions of this UI, aren't I? If I uncheck the checkbox, is it actually unchecked? That's something you can't really do the same with something like Jest. But with Cypress, I can really make sure that it does render the way I expect. Okay. Let's go back to our test. Let's make another test. I'm going to test if I check on not just the checkbox itself, but on the label. Because if this is a portable device like a phone, it's really hard to get your finger right on the box, isn't it? I want to see if they check the label as well. It should also uncheck. So I'm going to write a test for that. So if I check the label, it should uncheck. Okay. And let's say, let's make this test so we can uncheck. We can uncheck the explicit checkbox. There, okay. I'll make another test. There. And this is, we can check the checkbox or uncheck a checkbox by clicking on the label, by clicking on label. So let's write a test for that. So we're going to start the same way. We're going to be starting by doing a visit to our site. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and run our test. So first thing, visit. And now I want to find the EP. So I want to locate the EP item. Let's do an inspect of that. What is that thing? Okay. So it looks like that's this label. There's my label, and it has content of EP. So the checkbox is there, and its label, although it's very small, its label is there, and the label has the EP text. So I want to test if they click on that word EP, it will also uncheck. All right. And that label has a class of filters label. Okay. I'm going to grab that. Let's try to find that. Now, there's other commands in Cypress. We can also say sci dot contains. There, the sci dot contains. And let's look at Cypress. Let's look at the API. There we go. Okay. And we'll look for contains, sci.contains. Here we go. Once again, this is in the querying succession. There's a lot of different ways you can query. Get is very common. Contains is like the second most common one we use. Find elements by their content. With get, we can find elements with their attributes, like a class or is an element. With the contains, we can find an element by their content. We all know what content is, right? Content is the stuff between the pointy braces. So there's the open tag, there's the close tag, and the content is the stuff in between the open and close tag. And I want to find something with the content of EP. So I'd say sci.contains EP. It also works by itself as well. And we click on contains. There's a whole section on how to use sci.contains or .contains. Okay. They show you correct usage, and interestingly enough, they also show you some incorrect usage, common misuses of the contains. For every one of these API calls or functions, there is a heck of a lot of documentation telling you just how to do it. It's really amazing. It goes on forever. And this is just a simple contains, right? So the documentation for Cypress is very, very good. So in this case, I want to go sci.contains content. And I can use this example. Sci.contains the thing I'm looking for. So I am looking for EP in my page. So I'm going to do sci.contains EP in my test. So sci.contains the string EP. Back to my test, see what happened. Okay. So there's my test. Now I have two tests, so it did collapse them and both tests passed. I'll just click on one test to show the results of that test. And yes, it found sci.contains EP. Great. Okay. So what should I do with that EP? So now, should I uncheck it? Let's try that. Let's go and uncheck. I'm going to uncheck that checkbox. Okay. So I'm going to run uncheck on that checkbox and I get an error. And Cypress is really trying to help me. It says, hey, wait a second. You're trying to do an uncheck, but this thing ain't a checkbox. Like, what are you doing? It's a label. You can't uncheck a label. So it's self-asserting and it's not allowing me to uncheck a label, which makes perfect sense. So what should I do to that label to make this action happen? I can't uncheck it. So what am I doing to that label right now with my mouse? I'm doing a click, aren't I? So in this case, it is indeed, yeah, thank you, Stanley. It's a click. Because you can pretty much click anything on a page. So click is always safe, isn't it? I'm doing a click. And my test did pass. So yes, I clicked. Look at that. Let's look at the before and after. There. So there's before the click and after the click. Of course, now you see the Cypress highlight is on the label itself. And it did. Okay. So now I should be able to check if that checkbox is unchecked. Let's try that. Let's add my, try my same thing here. Should not be checked, right? Let's see what happens. Okay, well, yes, but the label isn't checked. Kind of a misleading test because a label is a label. And yeah, I suppose I could say it is definitely it's not checked, but it can't be checked because it's a label. So I'm looking at the wrong thing, right? Is the label checked? It doesn't really apply. So I get falsy value. What happens if I say checked, by the way? I'm kind of curious if it should be checked. If I try to say checked to a label, what do I get from Cypress? And I can tell Cypress is waiting, which means something's gone wrong. It says, hey, you're trying to check if a label is checked. That can't happen because it's not a checkbox. So obviously I can't check that label for checked. I have to still go ahead and get that checkbox itself. Okay. So let's look at that checkbox. Back to our DevTools. Now I do know that all these checkboxes also have an ID. So I know I kind of did the long way of getting the checkbox this way, but I'm just going to grab that ID. So sci.get, and the ID in this case is explicit. So I'm going to grab that checkbox directly. Explicit. There we go. Oh, sorry, I'll grab the EP. Where's the EP one? That's a different one. Inspect, that is a label of, where's the checkbox? Oh, the ID's EP. Let's get the ID of EP. There. Back to our test, see if it found that. I always do things incrementally with my tests. I do a little bit, and then with Cypress, I watch what happened. Apparently it worked, and I got the EP, so great. So I clicked the label, and I got the checkbox there. Now, I can now uncheck it, or I can see if it's checked. Is it checked? It should be should. And in this case, it should be checked. Be checked. And there's my test. So all tests are passing. I click on that, and yes, my test passes. That checkbox is checked. So this is a typical Cypress check. We really ask the little nitpicky questions about the website. Do the little things we expect to happen actually happen in this site? And there could be thousands of these. Do all of these behave that same way? So right away, that's 10 tests right there for checking each one of those if they uncheck and check correctly with both the checkbox and the label. Okay. So one more quick thing before the break. My code is looking a little bit messy, right? It's not really dry. I have some redundant code or duplication of code. So what can I do here? Okay, I'm doing this sci.visit every single time. So what I should do is pull that out and have that run before each test. And as you can imagine, inside Metascribe, there really is a thing called before each. It's like that. Okay. So before each test, I can do things. Okay. In this case, I will do my sci.visit. Let's just put that there. Why not? And now I don't need my sci.visits here, and my tests will run the same. There we go. It's just visiting before each test. So very convenient to do it that way, isn't it? So now it says, oh, look, you ran the before each. They make it really, really easy to follow along. Okay. Yeah, you had a before each. I went there for you, and then I did this. By the way, if I forgot to do this and I had this in here, see what it says. The test still passes, right? It says before each, but then I visited again. It didn't cause any errors or warnings because it doesn't know that's what you want to do. But you can see these two things happened. Maybe it's a bit wasteful. So I can take out that visit like that. And it runs by before each. Cypress does make it very, very easy to see what's going on. And yeah, I get this. It gets confused like this sometimes. It's kind of weird. Yeah, I've seen it happen a couple of times. So run my test again. There. Sometimes I get this weird confused thing from Cypress. There we go. Oh. Run her again. Yeah, the CSS gets lost, but it's not a big deal because I'm going to do something else anyways. I'm going to close this test. So this is not bad, but this is hard-coded, isn't it? This URL. And I don't really want to hard-code things like addresses inside my my tests, do I? It wouldn't really be a good practice. So I probably instead should put this out in some kind of configuration file or something. Okay, this is like my base URL, and I want to make that more of a variable. So what I can do in my Cypress.json, I can actually define a base URL, which surprisingly is called base URL. And I can say what the base URL should be for all of my tests in this suite, because I'm testing one site, so I might as well put it all in one place. So let's take that URL right there. I'll put that inside our base URL instead. Okay. Now, of course, we have changed the test, and Cypress would have closed my test. I closed it already, so we don't have to do that. But now I have base URL, so now in my test, I can just say go to where? What should I put here now? What do I visit? Like some suggestions. Well, base URL, but this is a string, so yeah, go to slash, exactly. Just go to slash. It will add base URL onto the front of that. So this is the base URL, so anything else comes after that. So my base and then slash. Okay. So now I've encapsulated all of my Cypress configuration into one file. So I can have several of these, one for each test scenario. Or the customer, I could make a cypress.json.example, and they could fill in the blanks for their own preferences. So yeah, it's over here, so it's being tested on this server with different things as well, right? So, okay. And the question is, before each describe block, can you have separate before each? Yes, you can. And inside each describe, you can have multiple for eaches as well. Cypress does make it really, really easy to use, okay? Let's try our test again. We added this for each, but we had to shut down our test because of the, we changed the config. So let's go ahead and run our test again. So checkbox.spec, we'll run this. I have my two tests. Grab it before each, and let's see what happened here. Oh yeah, it did. It visited that. So as far as it's concerned, it worked exactly the same way. So this is great. Okay. Any questions so far on Cypress? A little more to do. Fairly simple tests, but really, it doesn't get much harder than this. This is about as difficult as it gets. We add a few lines, and there's not a lot here. We do some pretty complex tests because of the fact that Cypress uses jQuery, which is pretty amazing. It allows us to do some pretty easy testing for our Cypress. Okay. So any questions on Cypress so far? Okay. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back after the break, and we'll start doing some more testing with Cypress. We'll see everyone in 9 minutes and 57 seconds, and we'll carry on with some testing with Cypress. Cypress is really fun. So it really is like just playing a video game all day long. So, okay, see everyone in a few minutes. Okay, and there's our, oh, I guess this peels a banana. Cool. All right, welcome back. Let's carry on with our discussion on Cypress. All right. So Cypress is really cool. Let's go over some of the interesting features of Cypress and things you can do with it. Now you may have noticed in this dashboard, it's got some controls, but on the top it says Electron version 100. It's like, what is that? Well, that lets me choose my browser. Electron is the built-in one, or the built-in browser that you get with Cypress. They actually package their own browser with Cypress, but you don't have to use their browser. You can choose your own. I happen to have Firefox, Edge. I have Chrome, but it's not on this partition on this computer. So I can choose Edge, for instance. It would run all my tests in Edge or all my tests in Firefox. So if I selected Firefox and I ran, let's say, my checkbox spec, it should run my tests in Firefox. and I can see how my tests actually look running in a Firefox browser. And that's exactly what it's done here, right? Okay. So another interesting thing about Cypress is we very often use this UI or interactive mode of Cypress, which is great. And it's fantastic for building tests. And it's really great for showing customers like, yeah, here we go, sir. Here's our cool test. But what we can do instead is we can run Cypress in command line instead. And to do that, let's just go in and we'll change our package.json. Okay, we'll make another script. We'll call it run, I guess. It doesn't matter. But we're going to use the Cypress run command instead. Okay, we have the Cypress open and we have the Cypress run. When you run Cypress on the command line, it looks a little bit different. Let's go ahead and there's our previous run. We'll go npm, but this time we'll run our run, and we'll see what happens. Now, as you could probably guessed, this is going to run much like Jest or Mocha, but what's it going to do? Because it has to actually instantiate a whole browser and interact with the browser on the command line. So let's watch what happens here. If I go run or run, it's going to then initialize my tests. Make it a little bigger so we can watch what happens. It does take a few seconds. It's loading Electron. It's loading its built-in browser. I didn't say anything else. And ran my tests. Look at that. So runs the first suite's passing, the second suite's passing, finished processing, and wait a second, what is that? Video. What is happening here? Video. It generated a video of every single one of my tests. How awesome is that, right? I could actually go and look, and I probably, what did it make here? Did it make a video? It did. It made a folder or a directory called videos inside my Cypress. Let's just look at this. There. Pull up. I'm on Windows right now, but they're videos. I've got these two videos. Let's see what they look. I want to see what they look like. What on earth happened here? It's showing the test running as if, it's very fast, as if I was there. So if I ran this Cypress overnight, I can see what happened and where the test actually failed, right? Let's pause it right there, I guess. There. I can see what had happened. Let's pause. Went there. It's really, really fast. I wasn't fast enough. There we go. Keep going. So you can see everything, even though you're running the tests in CLI or command line mode, it generates videos. Now, that's optional. You can turn the videos off. There's actually a command where you specify don't generate videos, because as you can imagine, generating a video does take a lot of processing, of course, right? So you might not always want to have a video, but if you don't do it, it's going to make a video for you and tell you the results of your tests. And it gives you a summary report saying, yes, all these tests passed, well, just the two, and any errors as well, okay? So much like Jest, you get a summary, but also you get videos. Like, how awesome is that? To get a video of your tests. Amazing stuff. Okay, let's go open Cypress again the normal way, run Cypress back in interactive mode. Okay. And now we're going to test something else. We're going to test what happens when someone types something into this input right there. So if I type in Queen, for instance, now I want to see just the input. Can I type something in? First off, like, just because the input's there doesn't mean it's actually active. Am I able to type stuff in? If I type, do I see what I expect to see? Do characters get entered in that input? These are really pointed questions, things you would just take for granted. But if I type a Q, there's a Q show up there. If I type an E, if I hit the backspace key, does that work? And I end up with what I want. So I'm going to ask some really hard questions of this input control. Okay. So I'm going to make another spec here. There. I'm going to call it typing because I'm going to test the typing feature of this particular site. Right. Let's make a one right here. We'll call it new file, and I'll call it typing. .spec. Side being the new one, but we're using version 9, so we'll use .spec. Okay. And I want to use my old one because my checkbox wasn't bad, right? So I'm going to just copy this because we all know how safe that is. And I'll put that in here and I'll just take out some tests and kind of clean it up because then I still want to visit my site. And I'll just do that there. And I'm going to say tests for the input field, there. There. So there's my typing spec. All right. And let's make a very first test where it says it can type into the input field. The most basic test. Can I type anything inside this input field? Okay. So let's go to my test. I'll start this one, typing.spec. And what I'm using Firefox. It's Firefox, I might get a network thing with Firefox. We'll see what happens. It might be okay. All right. So far, so good. Okay. So there's my test. Didn't do anything, but it ran my before each. So now we need to get this input, don't we? So inspect that thing. I'll go into my Firefox. Here it's a little bigger. There. We're going to inspect this. And we want the input. Okay, so it looks like that is inside a form called search form, and there's an input with class equals, looks like radius. So I look pretty simple. I can probably get that thing. Okay, so I'll do a sci.get. So sci.get, and this is jQuery or jQuery selector, so it's easy. It was dot search form class, so that'll be dot search underscore, it was 2 underscores? It was 2 underscore form. Okay. And I'll just double check my test. I like checking because it's also fun to watch, right? Try again. And there it is. Oh, I expect that trying to find but never found it. Let's take a look. I think I spelled it wrong. I did. SAE. Cypress is self-asserting. So you know right away if you've made a mistake. Let's try it again. Our test. Oh, Seach form. Man. Once again, there we go. I'll switch back to Electron, by the way, because sometimes my Cypress gets a bit confused if I use Firefox in this configuration. So I'll switch to Electron. There we go. Back to my typing spec. Okay. Did I spell search right this time? Okay. Third time's a charm. Okay. So I got my search form. There it is. All right. Inside that form, I want to find the input field. So I'm going to find the input. And I want just to be safe, I'm going to get the input with class equals radius. There's only one in there, so I probably could have safely got input and just said input like that. And let's see what happens there. Yeah, that was fine. But I'm going to go input dot radius just to be really precise, because in case there's a minor change, I want to kind of future-proof myself against any errors in here. Okay, and that worked. So all my searches work so far. Get the page, get the form, get the input. Okay, now I can do stuff to that input. So I want to type something inside that input. What do we think the Cypress command would be to type something into an input? Who wants to hazard a guess on this? Type. That might not be a bad guess. Let's take a look. Is there a thing called type? Go to our amazing website and type. We'll look at sci.type or just type. And testing type. Type. TypeScript, type. There we go. Okay. Yes, there is an action called type or dot type. Okay. Now it tells you how to use it. Now, I obviously cannot just go sci.type. Type must be done to something. So I have to have an element first, much like in jQuery. You can't just go val in jQuery, could you? We had to go get the input and then dot val. So same thing with type. It is an action. So I'm going to type. And the simplest case, it just says, yeah, type stuff. Good enough. Okay. So let's try and type something into our input. We're going to go dot type. Give it something to type. We'll say queen. Okay. Oh, that was pretty fast. Let's run it and see what happens. That was really fast typing. Try it again. You almost miss it, right? It worked. It was pretty fast, but that was a bit too fast for me. Although it's great for a fast test, I want to make sure my website can handle different typing speeds. It's clear my site can handle really, really fast typists. So I'm going to try to slow that down. So if I look at the type options, every option or command in Cypress has options, and they have lots of options. In this case, I've got a delay option. I also have what's called a force action, which is really cool, okay? And a bunch of others. But in this case, I'll use the delay. I'm going to delay a few milliseconds in between each character, okay? So I add a second parameter to my type. And I'll say I want a delay of something. And we'll make it like me. I'll say a delay of what? 250 milliseconds, a quarter second in between each character. Let's run our test. And now it types a lot slower. Great. Let's make it even slower. Make it like tape like me. Okay. 650 each character. So there it goes. Very slow typing. Okay. Okay. But that's not quite like me, is it? I tend to type really fast. So I just type badly. Okay. So I type fast, but very badly. So this is fast and kind of accurate. So let's try another test. Let's say the website can handle an error. So if I type something in and I make a mistake like I always do when I type, I can handle a backspace and then keep on going. Let's see if this website can handle that. Does it respond to the backspace key appropriately? So this is the same thing. Let's call my test can handle backspace. Oh, in the input field. Sure. Okay. So now I'm going to type something in, get my input radius, and then type Mercury. But I'm going to type it with, let's say, too many R's. There. Like that. Okay. There, I did that. All right. So I typed in MERRRC. Okay. Too many R's. So I'm going to enter a backspace. Well, backspace. Just like that. That's one backspace. Mercure, one backspace. I need two more. So I'll give it some backspaces in my type. And then Re. That should work. Queen, that works. And then Mercure. Oh, not quite. Need a C. Need a C. There. Okay. Mercury. Did I spell it right? I did. Okay, great. The question is, in real life, how detailed would we write the user interaction types? Looking at it, the possibilities, it seems endless. Yeah, you're right. They really are endless. You can go all out, but it's a matter of budget, right? You want to make sure that the simple ones work. Can you type in the field? That's a given. Backspace, I would test that for sure, okay? Make sure if the input's disabled, they can't type into it. Copy paste, that'd be a great one too. Exactly. Can you copy and paste? Maybe some places have paste disabled, and that you can actually do that in a website. You can disable pasting. I discovered though you can get an extension to override that, which is pretty cool. So who hasn't done that, right? It's like, I can't paste. You jerks, come on. I'll teach you. Get my extension, and I can still paste. So yeah, I hate that when they don't allow, especially password fields. Please enter email again. Copy paste. What? I can't. You're kidding me. I can't paste that email. I hate you guys. So yeah, you can. There are lots of ways a user can break your site. You're totally right. Okay. So all right. So in this case, I'm testing the backspace work, and apparently it works great. Okay. So far so good. By the way, you might want to wonder, well, these extra characters, they're like a special character, like backspaces, or a curly brace. What if I want to actually have a curly brace in my text? We can do that. There's actually another option. I'll put it here because it's a little long. It looks like this. Under options, where's it right there? I can go comma, parse special characters false, where it actually lets you type in special characters. It's used in the event we want to actually type in curly braces or other special characters recognized by the type. But we'll turn that off for now, so we don't want that here. So great. Okay, I made that 150. Okay. And is there a way to test it? User can paste into input. Yes, there is. We won't do it today, but you're exactly right. We can test copy and paste. In fact, that was one of those advanced tests we had that we deleted earlier, was testing copy and paste feature. Okay. So let's talk about something else. You notice I've also got a little bit of duplication of code here again, don't I? I've got this. It's with backslashes? No, apparently you can't escape with backslashes. I tried it, Stanley. You have to tell to disable your curly braces. All right. So it looks like I still have some duplication of code here. I've got this input both times. I would like to, because all my tests are based on this input, aren't they? I want to get this first. Before each test, I also want to get this input as well. So I could do that. I could say, well, let's just get the, put this here and see what happens there. Okay. And now, but I can't just go dot type all by itself, can I? So that doesn't quite work. I still have to have an object to do an action on. So although, yes, it is indeed getting that input, right? And if I look at the type, I can't just do a sci.type all by itself, can I? Because it doesn't know what to type into. So I've got a bit of a dilemma, don't I? Although it is doing my test for me. If I look at my test, it did in fact did the sci.get here. So it got it, but I had to get it again because I've got nothing here to do a dot type on. Okay. And I can't do this. I can't go const, input equals, not the least of which this is not in scope. I can't access here. So I have to have a way to access this sci.get, but I want to do this, right? I really want to have access to this sci.get so I don't have to have all this sci.get stuff here. Well, it turns out there is a way to do that in Cypress. And this is what are called aliases. We can save that sci.get, okay? We do what's called an as. We save it as an alias. So I'll save it as the input field. There. I've saved that sci.get as a named alias. And now I can use that in another sci.get. So I go sci.get. And I can get my input field. And I have to give it a string, just like that. Okay, so I've saved it as input. Okay, let's actually see what happened here. Well, of course, my get didn't work, but you notice now it saved that as input field. So it saved that alias as the alias input field. I can use that in my get. So awesome. Just put, whoops, input field right there. But what's wrong with this? Come on, copy and paste always gets me there. I can't do this, can I? This is jQuery. What am I going to get if I try this input field? Well, that means I'm searching for an element input field like body or HR or a div. There's no element called input field, so I can't use this, can I? Okay. So Cypress had to decide on a character to use. We know that dot input field would find something with a class of input field, and pound or hash input field would find something with a ID of input field. So Cypress had to come up with a character that would identify an alias, and they chose at. Search for an alias, and it's not bad because at's kind of an A, so I'm okay with that. A little A in the middle there. So yeah, alias input field. Not a bad choice, okay? And it can search for the alias, and there, and it did. It did the get of the alias there, okay? So now I can replace both those get with my get of my alias instead. Oh, and no dot there. Okay. And there. So now there's my get, and there's my get. It says I'm getting that alias. So yet another way to make your code much more concise and really encapsulate things on their own. So you don't have to worry about doing this over and over again. So now it's pretty simple test, isn't it? Okay. This is great. Okay. Let's try one more. Let's talk about actually doing some fetches in our Cypress test. Right. So far, we've been using the this with a live API. So anything I type here, so if I type in Queen, it goes out to iTunes and gives me whatever happens to be on iTunes that particular day, right? This is a test, and we try to avoid what's called flaky tests, where the test produces different results every time. We don't want that. We want to have fixed tests where we can be guaranteed every time what we have results for our test. So what do you think we do to use fixed data in Cypress? Well, it's called mocks, isn't it? So much like with Jest, we can also do mocks in Cypress. And they look a little simpler than Jest. The first thing we have to do is we have to get some mock data. And we put the mock data in our fixtures folder. Now, these are the examples I got with Cypress, but I'm not using any of these. I have a little fixtures file right here. I called it iTunes.json right there. And all it is a result from iTunes that is fixed. Okay. Awesome. And it happens to be from Daft Punk. That I totally know what that is. Okay. So this will be my fixed data. Okay, so now I've got some fixed data. How do I use a fixture? So what I want to do now is have a fixture. I'm going to make a new spec because this one I like the way it is. Well, let's make a new one. Let's make a brand new spec file. We'll call this API results. API results dot spec. And don't forget the JS, because I sometimes forget that and wonder why the heck my test isn't running. You still have to add .js onto your file. Okay. Let's grab my typing. I suppose I could have copied the file, but let's put it in here. Okay. So this one test is all I need for now. Okay. All right. So what I want to do, I'm not going to type anything yet. I'm just my visit. So I've got my visit. And I'll just clean this out for now. There. There we go. So now I've got my API result spec. So what I'm going to do here is in my API, I still want to visit this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to intercept that visit and inject my own code. And let's take a look at API. Oops, go here. Go to docs. I go to the API section here. And there's a little search bar right there, right there. Okay, and let's look for intercept. Okay, it allows us to intercept things. So we can go side or intercept a get. Either one works. In this case, I'm going to intercept a get. Okay, and you intercept a get by giving a pattern. So there, the method, the URL, and the static response. So I'm going to intercept the get method of my iTunes search. I'm going to give it a pattern to match as the URL, and I'll give it a static response. And that looks like this. Okay, I'm going to start with my visit. Okay, in this case, it's my get slash there. There. Oh, wrong one. Let's go to my results. And I'm going to use that as my base, and then I'm going to dot intercept, which let's see if I can spell that. Is that even close? I think it is. Okay. So I'm going to intercept the get method of that. There. So now when you see a get on that side visit, and I'm going to intercept the actual URL. And that's pretty easy because I can actually look at what happens in my site here and go to my network. And if I do a anything, there, that's the search right there. It's a pretty long URL, but it's looks like that. So iTunesApple.com, that's the base, and then search question mark, and then a whole bunch of stuff. So this is the pattern I'm going to look for, this end part of the URL. So iTunesApple.com, search, and then question mark, and then my big long query. Now I don't care about the actual content of this. I'm going to simplify that. I'm just going to look for anything slash search, and then anything after that. I'm going to be lazy. I could have gone question mark, but I'm going to even forget that. Just that's the pattern I'm looking for. So whenever it sees a get with that pattern, star search, which means anything with slash search, I can then replace it with my static content. In this case, I can give it a fixture data of my iTunes.json. This is much easier than doing it the mocks in Jest, which many people I know have trouble with that mocks file. Well, it turns out this is a little simpler. Simply use this fixture, use iTunes.json, and it will use the fixture file iTunes.json. Let's take a look at our test. Okay, so let's see what happens. And Intunes, let's take a look. And of course, I spelled iTunes incorrectly. Okay, totally on purpose to demonstrate what Cypress would do, of course. Okay, we're in our test. Okay, so that's great. Now nothing happens, right? Because I haven't done anything in my test. So why don't I go ahead and see what happens? It opened up the page, but there is no search. So I probably should put something inside the search field. So if I type in anything here, what do I get? Oh, that was unexpected. If I type in Queen, I still got Daft Punk, which I totally know what that is. Yeah, so my fixture data is in fact working. No matter what I type here, I still get the awesome Daft Punk. Okay, great. So my fixture data is working, isn't it? Okay, so now I can go ahead and do the same thing in my test. I'll take my my typing because that was pretty similar. Let's just take my type right there. I'll go ahead and type something into our input field. We'll type in Daft punk. Not that it matters because we're going to get anything anyways. And now we should get some data. Oh, let's take a look. Alias. Oh, input field. Of course, I need my as, don't I? Let's save my alias here to my as. There we go. Okay. There we go. Here's my test. So it did my before alias, it input field type stuff in, and it did a fetch of that. Fantastic. Okay. And it's before after. You notice it's flashing back and forth? That's because it's showing me the before and the after of that particular line that I'm hovering over. If I click on that, then I can say request, response, request, response. Very cool. Okay. When you do a get that way, or it's doing an API call inside the app, it shows you what's happening before, in other words, the request part, and then the after, which is the response of that query. It's pretty cool. Okay. All right. So I type that in. Okay. Why don't I see what happens? Because you notice when I type that stuff in here, I typed it in there, and then what happened was it made a request and a spinner shows. I'm going to test if that spinner actually shows, because this spinner is supposed to indicate to the user that it's thinking. So although it's very fast, we can't really see it happen when we do it manually. That spinner is supposed to show. It shows it's waiting for something to happen. I want to see if that spinner is actually visible. Okay, let's inspect that thing. Inspect it here because it's hard to get in a live browser. There, it's an image with a class of, no surprise, spinner. So I'm going to get that thing, and I want to see if that thing is actually visible on my screen, because that should be happening, shouldn't it? So let's go ahead and we'll do a sci.get. Sci.get. I'm going to get the spinner. I could have said image.spinner, but I think there's only one spinner on the page. I think I'm pretty safe, right? There it is. Let's see if that worked on my test. So close off this. Okay. And all right. So it did. It said, oh, it got the spinner. Look at that. It found the spinner. Test successful. I'm going to say dot should do a test. I want to see if this spinner is visible. What do we think I should use for a should? Well, how about should be visible on the screen? That means it shouldn't be off the screen or hidden by something. It should be visible on the screen in this current configuration. Okay, and yes, it passes. The spinner is in fact visible. Okay, now you notice this happened after, because this is an asynchronous call. So I tested immediately if I got that spinner as soon as I typed. And of course, since React is things happen instantly when you change the DOM, when I typed, I got that spinner immediately. And then the async call took over, my Axios call, and I got my results there. Okay, right. And I got my request and my response. Okay, so that's great. The spinner was visible. So now I'm going to have my Cypress call wait until their response happens, because you notice I've got this happening here. If I did more commands here, they would end up here. Okay, if I did any more gets or any more Cypress.contains or anything, they're going to happen here in the synchronous part of my code. And this get didn't happen till a couple of milliseconds or even a second later. So I have to tell Cypress to wait for those results. So I'm going to do a sci.wait. Sci.wait. Wait until that particular thing finished. Okay. So I'm going to save that intercept as an alias. So as, I'm going to save it as, I'm going to call it my iTunes results. There. So I can tell Cypress to wait, just pause for a second. Don't do any more Cypress commands until this thing finishes or until you get a failure, right? So I'm going to say wait for that. I use the @ so alias results. And now any command after that won't occur until that iTunes results finishes. All this does, it just really pauses, in effect, your commands. Otherwise, it'll keep on checking DOM items that happen in this part, right, of my code. But since I said wait, now any other command is going to happen after that asynchronous fetch took place. Okay, so now I can do more stuff. I can say I should have a list here. What's it look like? Take a look. Let's inspect this thing. I'll put a little higher. And let's inspect, we'll inspect this thing right there. There. Make it taller. There we go. Okay. So there's all these. So I got a main now. Okay. So I've got my main, which is there, but it's initially empty. After I fetch things, that main should have stuff in it. So I'm going to get that main. Okay, so let's do a main. I can daisy chain this. I'll just say dot get the main element. Back to my test, and I got the main, which, as you can see, it highlights everything. So it's kind of hard to see because the screen's a little too small. But there. Okay, it's highlighting everything. There's my main. And now I'm going to see my main should contain. Oops. Okay. I'm going to say my main should or contains. I'm going to get whatever contains inside main. I'm going to say my main should contain. So I'm just going to say contains. 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 And let's see what it should contain. What can I test here? I can pick one of these. Probably, let's take a look. They're all so good. Random access memories. Yeah, totally. Okay. It should contain, I'll just say random access. So once the fetch is finished, this main should contain, or I should be able to fetch an item that says random access memories. So I'll say contains. I'm still doing a fetch here, right? Contains random access. Remember, self-asserting. If random access wasn't there, that'd be a failure of my test, wouldn't it? And no, looks like I found right there, random access, right there. So it did find that as part of that self-asserting fetch. Worked great. Okay. Okay. I can continue on, by the way. I just did this because I daisy chained this with my rate. I could have put it separately, but I simply chained it onto my weight just for a demonstration. But now I'm still past that part. I can do more checks, right? Let's do something else. Let's maybe check if I uncheck that explicit. I think I've got one red here. So if I uncheck that, that one should disappear from my list. Let's try that. There. Yes, it's gone. Okay. I'm going to see if this works. So when I check that, it's there. If I uncheck that, it doesn't show. Let's see if that happens. Okay. So I'm going to get the explicit checkbox. We know how that worked before. I did my sci.get. Did it before, and we know that it had the ID of explicit. Pretty sure. We'll find out if I spelled it right because it'll fail. And let's take a look. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Explicit. Sci.get. Let's take a look. Did I spell explicit incorrectly? I think that's correct. Let's take a look. That's not spelled right. You're probably totally right. There. Let's get my, oops, hold on. Let's fix that one. Explicit. Let's take a look. Let's see. There we go. Okay. I can't spell. Okay. All right. So it got the explicit. It's up there. It shows the top of the screen. So, okay, I got the explicit checkbox. Okay. I'm going to uncheck that checkbox. Dot uncheck. There. Okay, that all worked unchecked. Okay, before and after. So once again, it shows before and after, which is kind of cool. Okay, back and forth. Right. So, I mean, I could say should not be checked, but I can do better check. That daft club should have disappeared, shouldn't it? Here. So let's try that. In fact, we can test it in our DOM. Let's click on that uncheck and let's go to the before. There it is. Let's go to the after. And it has in fact gone. So I can add that to my test now. I'm going to say the sci.get and I'm going to get all of the articles inside that. So back to here, these are all articles. I'm going to get them all because I want to test all of them and see if something's inside that one. It's a slightly different way of testing for something existing. So I'm going to get all the items with article with the, there we go. Where's my mains? They're inside here. There we go. There we go. Okay, so all the articles with class of album. Okay, so let's get all of the articles. So articles, oops, article class album. Right. So I'm doing so far with my spelling. Okay, there they are. And I'm going to say it should not contain. So should. You notice we haven't done many assertions. Really, one assertion at the end is all we need. Unlike something like jest or mocha, we have all these assertions. Since these are all self-asserting, the only assertion we have at the end is it should not contain. So it's going to be not contain and not contain the string daft club. Okay, let's take a look. Well, it looks like my test passed. A little longer test, isn't it? So we go to our test body. We got the alias, great. We tapped in Daft Punk, which made really no difference, but that worked. Before and after, yes, okay. We got the spinner, okay. Was it visible? Yes, it was visible, okay. Okay, then we said, wait for the results to finish. When that happened, we simply got the main and we checked, does it contain random access, which it did. Then we said, well, let's uncheck the checkbox. So we got the checkbox and we unchecked it before and after. And then we got our article, all of our articles, and we said, does it contain Daft Club? Successful test. Okay. So I'm going through this very, very slowly, of course, right? But Cypress tests aren't that hard. And you know immediately if you have an error because it tells you right here, and it almost always tells you what the error is. In my case, it's almost always a typo, isn't it? All right. So that's how Cypress tests work. We're doing some today. They're nice ones. They're fun. They really are enjoyable to write, and they're super fun to watch. Anybody want to see a video or how this thing generates a video of these tests? Let's try that. Let's go ahead and stop this and have our tests run as the video again. Let's try that. So we're going to run, is it there? Oh, okay, we'll do our sci. Do we call it run? Double check. Sci run. Okay, let's run our test now in the CLI. npm run sci run. There we go. Okay. So it has to build up a browser. That does take a bit of setup. Okay, now it's got the browser built and it runs our tests. There we go. Now it's doing all my tests, isn't it? Oh, probably got an error in my field. That's okay. There we go. Okay, there we go. First one, first spec. Now it's building the videos. There we go. Okay, so I had one failing test. This sometimes happens. Let's take a look. I have noticed in the CLI, sometimes API tests, you do get funny things failing on you. Okay, let's take a look at our video. So here's our typing spec. Let's watch this run. There we go, album search. There's our video, it worked. Let's look at our checkbox spec. Let's watch that one run. Click play. Okay, and let's show my API, which these do sometimes fail. They sometimes take a little more work to get them working in the command line, which I won't do today. Let's see, I'm pretty sure it said I couldn't find something. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. All right. So yeah, this happens sometimes with the API call in CLI. I won't cover that today, but there's things we can add to our tests to run a command line. We will not be doing command line tests as part of our Compass work, so this is not really that big a deal yet. But okay. Anyway, that's our talk on Cypress. It is very cool. It's a really, really wonderful testing framework that I recommend everyone try. And when you work for a company, a lot of them may not have heard of Cypress. They've probably heard of Selenium, which is another one, also very great. Cypress is one of the new kids on the block. It is gaining popularity very, very fast because it's just so good. And I do recommend Cypress. And by the way, anyone's wondering how much Cypress costs, it's free. Cypress is just a free app. There is no cost. There's no price or buy now. You notice that in Cypress. It is totally free. It's produced by Cypress, and they just let people use it for free. So that's our talk on Cypress. Have some fun with it. It is really great. And the exercise today, they're not that difficult. So it's a pretty light day on Cypress, really low stress day with Cypress. Okay, everyone, have a great rest of your day. We'll talk again.